Hello everyone, welcome to Church Tech Corner. In this video, I will be going in depth on how compression works. So the compression feature on the Behringer X32 is located here. So you can click on view on your selected channel to see this, right? So there's 6 pieces to understand when dealing with compression. Now I want to start by saying that good compression is not supposed to be noticed. So, what does that mean? A compressor basically ensures that your decibels or volume stays within a certain frame, right? So it's not like a limiter that says that sets a max volume. It also does not push up lower volume as well. It just ensures that all of the peaks that you can typically get when you're playing music gets brought back down, and that you're sustaining a good ratio, essentially, right? It's never going to be like one specific decibel like all the time because music is supposed to be dynamic. But compressor basically helps you have more control, right? So that's one thing. So don't be freaked out if you're using compression for the first time and your response is, I can't even hear the impact. Well, that's the point. You're not supposed to hear it, right? It's supposed to be stable. Now, you are going to hear it if it's not working properly, and that would sound like peaks, right? You're going to be hearing a lot of peaks in the music. Typically, maybe with instruments with a lot of transients. So maybe like the snare, bass, vocals, especially, right? You're going to hear a lot of peaks. So that's where you want to use compression. So, first things first, I'll explain what all these 6 mean. So, starting with threshold. Threshold sets the decibel point where the compression turns on, right? So, for the purpose of this example, let's say our threshold is set at -10. That means any decibel louder than -10, so -9, 8, up until +10, for example, um, the compression will be turned on, right? So that's a threshold. The next piece is ratio. Ratio basically sets how much is clamped down. So right now, as you can see in my screen, the ratio is set to 5:1, right? So this means that for every 5 decibels above the -10 dB threshold, it's going to let 1 decibel through. So, very practical example. If, for example, my signal comes in at -5, which is 5 decibels above -10, right? The compressor will clamp it down to -9, right? Because it's going to let only 1. If it is, for another example, if it goes up to 0 decibels, so that's 10 decibels above the threshold, right? That means it's going to let 2 now, right? Because 5:1, 10:2, right? So it's going to let 2. So now it's going to be -8. So 2 decibels above -10, right? So that's how ratio works. And then if it's 4, right? For every 4 decibels, it's going to let in 1, then 3, and then 2, and so forth, right? So you can play around with the ratio and see what works best. Typically for drums, 5 works pretty good. For vocals, I like to keep it at 3, right? You don't want that much range, right? Especially because the vocal is probably the most dynamic piece of your music that you're mixing. So you don't want it to be off the charts too much. You want to keep it nice and tight. For drums, there's a lot of transients, like ghost notes, snares, for example. So a good range like 5 is good. And then bass as well. 5 is also pretty okay because there's also a lot of transients with that. So, attack. So, attack is basically how fast the compression comes on, right? So you can have it as a very fast attack. So it comes the volume can just go from, let's use our previous example, from -5, right, straight to -9 really quickly, or you can increase the attack to make it get there kind of slowly. I found with the band, typically, it's pretty good to have like a quick attack, especially with very dynamic like music. You don't want the decibel to be reduced after the fact, right? And then the hold. So the hold, think of the hold as how long the compressor stays on before returning back to normal. So let's use our previous example. So let's say we have a signal, right, coming in at -5. The threshold is -10. We know that the ratio is 5:1. That means that the signal will be reduced by the compressor to -9, right? For every 5 decibels that goes over, only 1 will be permitted to pass through. So -9, 1 above -10, right? The compressor turns on really quickly, 10 milliseconds, and then holds that signal at -9. See, holds that signal at -9 for 20 milliseconds, right? And then which then leads to the next piece. So let's say that signal has gone back down, like the original signal has gone back down, or like let's say the next note the bass player plays has gone back down to, let's say, -11 or 20, right? The release is how fast or how slow the compressor lets go to then go from -9 back down to the original signal. Or let's say the next signal comes in at 0 decibels. So how will it go from -9 to then -8? Because technically the new signal is louder, right? So that essentially is the gist of compression. As you can tell, it's not a hard limit. So compression or compressor is not a limiter. It basically allows you to keep your volume within a certain range. So it allows you to have control over the decibels. So I'll put in the description a good starting point. I also borrowed this from Collaborate Worship as well, right? For drums, bass, guitars, and for vocals as well. So this is a good starting point. Now, the way I prefer to do this is I set the template, right? And then I can go in and tweak. Obviously, I mix with my ears, not with my eyes. And then I know that I want a 6 decibel makeup gain, right? So the makeup gain is because, as you can guess, the overall volume of the signal is going to get reduced, right? So I want to push it back up, right? But then the question is, don't I want it quieter? Again, the compressor is not necessarily to make things quieter. It's to make sure the signal lives within a range, right? So if it lives within a range, I want that range to go higher. So I'm pushing up the overall volume of that range, right? So 6 makeup gain, and then I would turn on my threshold until I have a -6 dB reduction. So let's try this with the kick. Right, so first turn it on. There we go. So around there, -17, right? So anything around -17, anything past that point is going to get reduced. So that way it's consistent, right? So look, right? So notice how it's not, even with the makeup gain, it's not necessarily significantly louder, right? Because it's very easy to get tricked by the ears, because louder is always going to sound better, but it doesn't necessarily mean it sounds good, right? It's going to keep this down because it's hot. So yeah. Compress it just a little bit more. It's good. And then you can do the rest with, let's say, the snare, for example. Right? So make up gain at 6. More. A bit more. There we go. It's without compressor. Again, you can't really hear the difference, right? And that's the point, right? Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.